This is the Crime Cafe, where we get the real lowdown from crime, suspense, and thriller authors. Before I introduce today's guest, I'd like to remind you that the Crime Cafe Season 1 story package is available for sale on my website. Just go to debbiemac.com and click on the Crime Cafe link to hear all the podcasts and buy the stories, which have been contributed by all Crime Cafe guest authors. I'd like to introduce you now to another great crime author, Frank Zafiro. Zafiro. Am I saying that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Awesome. Okay, Frank Zafiro, who also writes under his real name, Frank Scalise. Both good Italian names. And he is here today to talk about his books. So welcome, Frank, and it's great to have you.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. You seem to have become something of a serial series writer. How did that happen?
Well, quite by accident, I think. I mean, as I wrote each book, I didn't want to let the characters go. And so questions would come up, hey, what happens next in this character's life? And once you start asking those questions, inevitably the answers come intruding in on your brain, and you have to follow it up and figure out exactly what did happen next and write the next book. I grew up reading a lot of fantasy and science fiction, kind of got away from it in my 20s, but as a kid, I read a lot of that. And of course, every fantasy book you ever read is part of a series. And so I really liked that progression where you had a story arc within each book, but you also had a series arc that existed as well. And you could just explore whatever you wanted to explore. So when I started writing crime fiction, I really shouldn't be surprised that that's what ended up happening.
That's very interesting. I was going to ask you what authors have influenced your own writing.
Well, when I was younger, I read, Tolkien and Roger Zelazny and Philip K. Dick. And then as I was older, in the crime genre, Lawrence Block for sure. Stephen King is a great crime fiction writer. He doesn't get credit for it, but he is. And who else? Those are kind of the biggies right now.
Okay. And I first became familiar with your work when I read the first novel in the River City series, Under a Raging Moon, which you've compared to Hill Street Blues or Southland. And I remember Hill Street Blues, and I think that's a great comparison. How do your other series differ from each other? I know that you tend to focus on Spokane, Washington, either fictionally or in real life. So how do they differ from each other?
That's a great question. There's the River City series proper, which is at 4 books right now, and that takes place in a fictional Spokane called River City. And those books are they're police procedurals for one, and for another, they feature an ensemble cast of first patrol officers, but then pretty quickly the detectives and even the administrators get involved. And so you have this entire police department, both vertically and horizontally, the people within it and how they deal with the challenges of the job and the big task that's going on in whichever book we're talking about. And so when you write a book like that, you get to jump from character to character and you get to see all these different perspectives. And it's a procedural, so the focus isn't so much on who the bad guy is, but on how or whether the police will catch him and when. One of my characters from that series, his run on the show, so to speak, kind of came to an end after the second book. And so there was a spin-off series of that, the Stefan Kopriva mysteries. And those are first-person mysteries. They're whodunits, and they're a little bit more noirish than the procedurals. And so they differ in that fashion. I wrote a series with Jim Wilski called the Anya Trilogy that's pretty much hard-edged noir. and it's also told in the first person, but there are two main characters, and the chapters alternate back and forth between those two characters, and they're both told in the first person. So you get that intimacy of first person narration and storytelling, but you get more than one viewpoint as the reader. So sometimes you know something that maybe this character doesn't know because you found out when you're reading a chapter that this character was narrating. And in those instances, I only wrote half of the book. I wrote one character and Jim wrote the other half. And so that's a completely different type of experience. So, they're kind of all over the map, really.
I was going to say,
maybe I'm schizophrenic, and that's the secret.
I was going to say, when people ask you, what kind of books do you write? How do you answer that question succinctly, like in an elevator speech?
I say crime fiction, mysteries, police stories, things like that. And that places it enough for people that if they're not interested, they know they're probably not. And if they are, then they'll ask further. And
yeah,
I can, ask them, well, what kind of mysteries do you like? Oh, I love the whodunits. Well, then you can steer in this direction. Or, I just loved NYPD Blue. Well, let me steer you this direction because
that's a great approach.
Yeah, works all right.
You're very flexible there, and you have so many books now. I have to read them, because I've read the Last Horseman, was it called?
Yeah, The Last Horseman.
Yeah,
which is not a Western, even though it sounds like it.
It's not. It sounds like a Western, but it's not. It's definitely a crime fiction book, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. And I read your first Stefan Capriva, which was really, really good. And I can see him becoming a series character. I can see how you would have done that. And I
just finished the third one in that series, actually, maybe a week ago. The first draft, anyway.
That's the one that's going to come out next?
Yeah, that should. Well, that's the one that'll come out next from just me. I do have a book with Eric Beetner called The Backlist that we wrote together in exactly the same format that I described with the Jim Wilsky Anya books. But that'll be out from Down and Out Books on the 15th of this month. So that'll be the actual next release with my name on the cover. But the new Capriva book will probably be the next one that I release that has only my name on the cover, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. What's that experience like, collaborating with another author that way? Is it they provide you with a chapter and then you feel like, okay, what would that character do under these circumstances once they kind of feed you that chapter? Is that the way it works? Is it?
Well, kind of, yeah, there's some element of that for sure. The difference between writing by yourself and writing with another writer, particularly if you're doing a back and forth that's a little bit structured, is you have to kind of agree at least on a compass direction for the story in advance. Because, writing takes a little bit of planning and work, and you're laying foundation and so forth. And if I think we're going north and you think we're going west, but I don't know it until I've already built the perfect northern bound wagon train, and then it's westward ho, it's going to throw a huge monkey wrench in all the works. So usually with all of the authors that I've collaborated with, we've at least set out a very rough outline to the midpoint or the 2/3 point of the book, and then we'll have to have another meeting when we get to that point. But so at least we know where we're going, what direction. And so, yeah, we would do it chapter by chapter, though. And the cool thing about that is when you get that chapter back from your co-writer, first off, it's exciting to read it because you're probably one of the first people in the world to get to see what's happening next in your own book. And then it really motivates you to dive in, write your chapter, do the very best job you can do because you don't want to let your partner down. And so that writer's energy that you get when you sit down and have coffee with another writer and kick around ideas or whatever, that spikes every time you get that email back from your writing partner.
That sounds wonderful, actually. Sounds like a lot of fun.
It's a pretty cool experience. It really is. The downside to it is you have to suspend your ego a little bit And for some people that might be a problem. It hasn't been with anybody that I've worked with, and you'd have to ask them, but I don't think it's a problem for me either, because sometimes their idea is better than your idea, or sometimes the direction that they want to go it's better than the direction you want to go, and if you're not if you don't treat that process with some respect and some humility, then I think it could go off the tracks. But I've been very fortunate. Everyone that I've worked with has been not only talented and had carried more than their own weight in the partnership, but if I had an idea and it was a better idea, we went that way. If they had an idea and it was a better idea, we went that way. And nobody seemed to get too bound up about, well, this is my book and you're collaborating with me, or something crazy like that. It's been a true partnership in every instance. So either I've gotten really lucky or I picked my collaborators well, one or the two.
Well, it sounds very much like the process of putting together a TV show, actually, where people sit around a table and throw out ideas, and the best idea wins. So collaboration is the name of the game, I think, when it comes to storytelling in that manner.
The thing too I was going to mention is that
yes.
it actually, the way that we do it with the alternating first person narrative, that dual first person narrative, that might take a little bit of the edge out of the lack of control that a writer may feel, because even though the overall story is a complete collaboration and we have to agree on the direction and the destination and all of those sorts of things, and there's a lot of collaboration and give and take in there, when you write your chapter, it's pretty much your chapter, and so you haven't surrendered totally to having control over something. And so I think that the writer in us, the creator in us that doesn't want to necessarily relinquish total control over the work, gets to hold on to a pretty good chunk of it. I know even in the editing process, I tend to go a little lighter on my co-writers' chapters than on my own, just because I feel like, tie goes to the runner. It's their chapter. If that's how they want to say it, that's how they want to say it. And it's good in those scenarios for there to be two separate voices, because they're supposed to be. They're two separate characters, and so it works out better that way anyway.
Okay, yeah. You have a fascinating background. You used to work in military intelligence doing linguist work. And
yeah, that sounds a lot sexier than it was. Basically, I did go into the Army when I got out of high school. I went to the Presidio of Monterey, which is where the Defense Language Institute is still housed. This was back in 1987 by the time I got to the Presidio. And I spent 15 months learning Czech and Slovak, which is a fun language, but not very useful in the civilian world. And then they sent me to Germany, and actually when I was doing that job, a lot of times I looked a lot like this with headphones on, scanning radio frequencies, listening for the communists to get on the radio and chat to each other. And so I was an interceptor. Of course, in their infinite brilliance, the Army, in their first move, they sent me to a unit in Germany that didn't have an interceptor mission. So I had to become an analyst on the job. So the benefit of it is I got both skill sets out of the deal. And the analyst skill set actually has had a lot more of a civilian application. But I was over there at the time that the wall came down in Germany, and the Velvet Revolution occurred in the was now the Czech Republic, and so it was a pretty exciting time to be right there, on the edge of it, just watching it happen. About 6 hours ahead of CNN. That's about it.
Have you ever considered writing a spy novel?
Gosh, not really. No, it's been done, and it's been done probably better than I can do it, and it doesn't excite me a whole lot. So, and that's the thing is, you got to be excited about something to write about it. At least I do for fiction, and I think most writers have to be pretty well in love with the work to pour their
absolutely
soul into it. So,
Well, certainly your background as a police officer and detective has influenced your work. Is how much like Spokane is River City, and how much of your own background goes into your writing?
well, River City is a very thinly veiled Spokane. And at the time that I decided to call it River City and to use the pen name of Frank Zafiro, I was still an active duty police officer, and I really didn't know how my bosses were going to respond to my writing career. And there are rules for other employment when you're a police officer, and I really didn't want to run into a problem there. And the only reason I was a little bit worried was that I was writing pretty gritty material, and sometimes the police officers were not necessarily behaving ethically because it's fiction. You have to do something to make it exciting, right? And there's a reason why Dudley Do Right got canceled. So anyway, so I went with the pen name in River City. It was actually suggested by a publisher that I was talking to at the time, and that didn't work out, but the idea stuck. And so Spokane River City is 97% Spokane. I mean, I've done what all writers do and monkeyed around with the geography to fit the story better, or renamed a street or a river. But outside of that, it's pretty close. As far as my own experiences, I haven't taken any actual experiences and translated them, quid pro quo into fiction that I can think of. But I have drawn heavily on the flavor and the color and the texture of what I experienced to try to bring that veracity, that verisimilitude. Did I get that one right?
Verisimilitude, yes.
I can read it. I can read it and spell it. I don't know if I can say it. To bring that to the writing and give people that feeling that they're there when they're reading the River City series. I want them to feel like they're on a ride along with the officer that they're reading about, or whatever. But fiction is fiction, and so I amp it up and blow it up, and of course there's just like any series on TV or any other book you read, everybody goes through 1,000 times more exciting things than they ever would in real life. So,
well, I have to tell you that one of your River City books, after reading a few of those, one of the characters, I won't say who, died, and it affected me so deeply I actually wept. So,
well, I guess I'm sorry, and thank you.
Needless to say, your work draws people in very effectively. At least it drew me in very effectively. And I still think about that character and think, wow, damn, how come he had to die?
Yeah, I actually got when I finished that book and I sent it to one of my friends who does some editing for me, and she's hardcore. She's she doesn't pull any punches, and she wrote me back and said, "Yeah, you can't kill this character." And I said, "He's dead. I mean, I can't do anything about it, And of course, so then we got into an argument about that. And then and she had her reasons why, and her reasons were great. But the thing about it is, the character was already dead. And what I mean by that is I wrote that book, and I think in 2011, and I had already written short stories in the River City universe back in 2005 or 2006 that reference the fact that character is dead. Now, it doesn't say when he dies or how he dies or anything like that, but I mean, it's there. And so, I mean, not to sound pretentious, but it's already canon that he's dead, right? So I can't.
His fate was sealed.
Yeah, I can't go back on that, or I'll have major inconsistency in the River City universe. And of course,
can't have that.
Can't have that.
Readers will point that out.
They will. They will.
And
they should.
Since you're a movie lover, I have to ask, as a fellow movie lover, what's your favorite movie or favorite movies?
Yeah, gosh, movies. I'm probably pretty boring in that regard. I loved Heat from '95 with Pacino and De Niro. Tombstone was a great Western. I love that. Val Kilmer was awesome as Doc Holliday. Really dug The Departed a few years ago. Was a big Braveheart fan when that came out way back when. What have I seen recently that I really liked? More recently I've been into watching really good television series, and so that's been more what I, rather than watching movies, binge watch Sons of Anarchy or Breaking Bad or way back when The Wire and The Sopranos, and so those they're not movies per se, but they're pretty powerful viewing.
Yeah, there's some really good television these days, and those movies, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Those are some great movies you mentioned. So very quickly, tell us what your new novel is about. Your upcoming.
The one that's going to be released on September 15th from Down and Out Books with Eric Beetner, who you should check out. He's got some awesome books. The Devil Doesn't Want Me is cool book. But it's called The Backlist, and it's basically about a scenario where the mob is downsizing, and they are cutting down on the number of people they have on the payroll, including button men, which are hitmen. And so they want to settle a few accounts before they do that. So they put together a couple of different lists of these overdue accounts called a backlist, and they give it to two different hitters. And essentially the idea is that the whichever one distinguishes himself or herself the best is who they'll keep on the payroll. Of course, it doesn't work out that way. But I wrote the character of Paula Bricky, aka Bricks. She's a pretty sharp-tongued, take no prisoners kind of very professional hit woman. And then Eric Beetner wrote Cameron, who starts out as kind of a little bit hapless, maybe kind of a little bit of a, I wouldn't say screw up, but he kind of stumbles around a little bit and makes a mess of things, but he still gets the job done. And so these two characters work their respective lists while there's other machinations going on. And it's, there's some, certainly some action, a lot of action. There's some blood, there's some dark humor, there's some snappy dialogue, at least I hope so. And it has a pretty frenetic pace, and the back and forth between Eric and I, between the two chapters, really keep the book moving. And so that'll be out on the 15th of September, which is coming right up. And they liked it enough, Down and Out Books did, to sign us for the sequel, the short list, which we've already finished and is ready to go for next September. So that's the next book that's coming out.
Well, that's awesome. And by the time I get this up, your book will be out.
Oh, great.
So I'm very happy for you with all of your success with your books. And I just want to thank you again for appearing on the show. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Sure thing. One more thing before we go, I just want to mention again that if you want to get the Crime Cafe Season 1 story package, you'll find it at my website, debbiemack.com, under the Crime Cafe link. And you can also buy
swag.
Merchandise. Yeah, swag. Yep, I got merch up there. There's Crime Cafe t-shirts, coffee mugs, all sorts of stuff. So you'll find that there on the Crime Cafe part of my website. And I'm talking as if you can see me because I'm doing this on video as well as podcast. For those of you who are listening by podcast, trust me, there's some cool t-shirts and stuff. So check it out. So in any case, thanks again, Frank, for joining me today. And I look forward to reading your book and to your other work as well. So take care, and thank you very much, everyone.